Thank you so much, Kayla. We'll check up with the weather a little bit later. But yeah, as you said, I have the one and only Scott Mall, our FreightWaves Classics editor, among other things.
Among other things.
Good friend of mine. We've been around these halls for a number of years together.
4+ years, yes.
4+ years. What's going on? We got kind of some anniversaries happening today in Classics?
Yeah, today is an interesting day. It's the day in 1947 that they first showed the map of what they thought the interstate system would look like. And the interstate system's been percolating since the late 20s. Actually didn't really start getting built until the mid-50s, but the idea was around for about 30 years before that. So the problem with the interstate system now, of course, it was built for a country of about 200 million people with a lot fewer cars and trucks. And so in the cities, most of us know, getting around on an interstate is tough, but it's still the largest public works project that's ever been done in history, not just in the US, but world history. It's a great system, at least in part. But today's an anniversary.
Let me ask you this, because I've always heard this, that parts of the interstate were specifically designed to be able to handle aircraft in the event of a defense or an attack on the United States, et cetera. Is part of that
true?
Yeah,
that is true. And of course we do have, I think there was a small plane that landed on an interstate in Florida not too long ago, but that was by accident, not on design. But yeah, they were meant to be, they were sold to Congress as a defense mechanism. And of course they've had great social and economic changes ever since, and luckily we haven't really had to use them for defense, but that was their primary purpose and is still a purpose. It's still called the National Defense Highway System. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. I mean, well, anybody who's played Axis and Allies knows that the economic engine is your best weapon in war, right?
Absolutely. And you know, with all of our problems, we've still got the best infrastructure in the world. We've still got the strongest economy in the world, and our interstates are part of that.
They really are. What's the future? I mean, we were discussing this before, and I think it's a really interesting thing, because you said it was developed for really, when it was planned out, it was planned for the U.S. in the early to mid-50s.
Right.
Right? And now here we are 70 years later. There's a lot of stress on these. Can we spend our way into a decent system again, or are there just bottlenecks that are not going to go away?
In my opinion, and that's all it is yeah, we've got these bottlenecks that it's hard to, it'll be very hard to change and very, 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 very expensive. For example, if you've ever driven through downtown Atlanta
Sure.
on the 75-85 highway where the two interstates go together through downtown, it's very hemmed in by very large, very important buildings. So the only way I know of that they can change 75-85, as an example, is to double deck it. And that would cost billions and billions and billions of dollars, as well as the upheaval that would cause in what is already a bad traffic situation.
Yeah.
And there are examples of that in every major city.
Sure. I don't know what the fix is, other than maybe separating cars and trucks somehow. Or obviously automation could computerize things and make them run more efficiently than just human beings reacting to each other on the road.
That's true. I mean, they do that in a lot of places now with stoplights. They used to have a certain length of time a stoplight would be red. Now it's if the traffic is very light, like in the middle of the night, those time periods are much smaller. They have sensors that can sense whether there are cars there or not. Right. But I think, the future, you asked me this question earlier, what will we look back on now?
Right.
I think it's electric vehicles and all the infrastructure that goes with that, autonomous vehicles, and perhaps, we've been talking about flying cars since we had cars almost. Will that happen? Can we take some of the strain off the roads by putting some of the traffic in the air? Who knows? And what problems will that cause? There's this thing called the law of unintended consequences.
Right.
So I don't think that anybody in the 1950s was thinking 70 years ahead. They couldn't imagine the volume of traffic on our highways today.
No.
So how can we imagine what might happen if some of our vehicles are on the road and some of them are in the air?
Yeah, and the other part of it is the defense. We talked about its importance, and obviously the supply chain. We've learned over the last couple of years. I think a lot of people's eyes were opened into the fact that supply chains and the economy can be weaponized quite easily, especially in the world that we live in these days, right?
Absolutely.
As you go more and more global, it can be weaponized, whether intentionally or accidentally. It can become weaponized and cause issues all over the place. So. Are we looking, and nobody foresaw that, right? I mean, coming out of World War II and those type of things, and okay, we're beyond that stuff now. Well, we're really not, right? This is going to be
Unfortunately, we're not. This is going
to be fought a little bit differently. We haven't learned anything. We're really not that smart of a species, right? But what's the classic going to be in 50, 60 years? Is this stressor from the last 2 years going to cause, or do you think it's a possibility of causing an event such as the interstate system, like, for instance, the move of maritime freight to the East Coast versus the West Coast and the infrastructure that's going on there and those builds? Because you see more and more that are going there. The Holland Street Tunnel issue in Baltimore, where you can go from Baltimore literally north or south, double stacked on a train, but you can't go west and you can't go through it.
Right.
Right.
Well, I think I think you mentioned the supply chain, and of course, over the last 30 or 40 years, the supply chain was globalized. Now there's talk about collapsing it again, having it near-shored or on-shored. Will that work? The reason that it went global in the first place was cost, and can we absorb greater costs here? Will people stand for their whatever costing twice as much because the cost of labor is more here? It would certainly be safer for us, but also do we want to recreate the problems of the late 1920s and early 1930s when there were protectionist tariffs put on and it slowed global trade, which was a fraction of what it is now, to glacier speed, and that had an impact not only on the U.S. economy, but it sent the whole world into what's called the Great Depression.
Right.
So again, that law of unintended consequences, even the smartest people can't see all the potential issues that can arise from the quote solution.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the interesting things, we're talking to Lorianne LaRocca, and I'd like your take on this as well, is she's talking about, and I won't name the players, mostly because I think I remember the names, but I'm not sure. But basically the freight coming in through the East Coast, right? And now you have these empties, and it's going into the interior, right? So they're coming around to the East Coast, they're in Columbus, Ohio, and Chicago, and those major distribution centers that hit the majority of population. But then the empties are going back out through the West Coast, right? Because it's faster.
It's faster and cheaper.
So it's running more like a combustion engine, which I always contended was one of the reasons why LA is so messed up. You're going both ways through the same valve.
Right.
Is that, that seems like it's possible that
yes,
it's actually occurring right now.
Right. At the same time, we're also depending less on China for our goods. So that's having an impact as well. And we don't know whether that slack that was being manufactured in China will be manufactured somewhere else in Asia, or will it be manufactured somewhere else in the world? These are all things that will play out over the next few years, and nothing is ever fully decided. You pointed out that World War II was supposed to be, first of all, World War I was the last great war. Oops, then we had World War II, and we've had a lot of little wars ever since. There's always a little war going on.
A couple conflicts.
Yes, that could become a global war, and unfortunately, the Russian invasion of Ukraine has that possibility. So we're back to the potential specter of World War III. But with transportation being so essential to our economy and to most economies in the world, we've got to figure out ways of making it faster and cheaper. And there are a lot of very smart people, working on those issues. But There's no one silver or magic bullet that's going to take care of that. We can't kill all the zombies in the world with just one answer. So that's where we are. It's always something, but it gives us all something to talk about and write about.
Yeah,
so that's what we do here at FrieghtWaves.
That's exactly what we do. Scott, thank you so much for coming in the studio. I love talking with you. I've never met a smarter gentleman, and I love reading your stuff. So I hope you're writing classics for many, many, many more years.
Well, I hope so too. Thanks so much for having me on.
Absolutely.
Take care.
Right now.